It is 8:07. I'm calling to order the special meeting of the investment company. We are meeting in person in the morning, the committee members and staff in attendance. We have a quorum with 3 committee members present. Video of today's meeting is also streamed live online. The link to watch today's meeting is on the Housing Commission's website at www.sdhc.org. Members of the public who wish to provide comments to the committee will need to complete a speaker slip here in the boardroom and submit it to our Vice President of Communications, Scott Marshall, who is standing at the side of the boardroom. To speak in favor of any item on today's agenda, please submit the gold-colored form. To speak in opposition to any item form, please submit the pink-colored form. Those who wish to address the committee about a topic that is not on the agenda should fill out a white speaker request form. Members of the public will have 3 minutes each to provide their comments about the agenda items or non-public agenda comments. However, if a large number of people wish to provide non-agenda public comments or speak on a single agenda item, comments will be limited to 1 minute each. Collective testimony by those who support or oppose an item shall be limited to no more than 15 minutes total per side. When I call your name, please step up to the podium, state your name for the record, and begin your comments. Non-agenda public comments. We will now proceed with the non-agenda public comments. Do we have any? No? Okay. However, no speaker slips have been submitted for non-agenda public comments. Next item on the agenda is going to be the minutes from the Investment Committee's September's 25th, 2024 meeting. If there are any speakers submitted, Scott will provide them. Oh, sorry, excuse me. Do we have any speaker slips for the minutes? Since no speaker slips have been submitted this morning regarding the minutes, we can move on. Do we have any comments or changes to the minutes, or is there a motion?
So moved.
Okay. Moved by Commissioner Klumpner and seconded by Commissioner Commissioner Cushman, to approve the minutes from the September 25th, 2024 meeting. Is there any discussion before I call the vote? Is there any discussion regarding the main motion on the floor, which is the approval of the minutes from the September 25th, 2024 meeting? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. The motion carries unanimously with 2 votes. Next item on the agenda is 100, the informational investment report from the 4th quarter of the fiscal year 2025. We will take public comments after the staff presentation. Zuket Dial, our Executive Vice President of Business Administration and Chief Financial Officer, and Amy O'Connor, Manager of Finance and Accounting Operations, will be presenting this item. Please begin when you're ready.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Investment Committee members. I'm going to go over our cash and investments as of June 30th. First of all, our investment policy follows the guidelines from HUD, PIH 96.33, and California Codes Section 5922 and 54601. Here you can see our cash and investments as of June 30th, 2025. We had, you can see the market value of our liquid investments, which include cash, both restricted and unrestricted, and our LAIF and SDCIP investments of $80.58 million. And the market value of our agency bonds of $71.73 million, for a total of $152.31 million compared to the previous quarter of $150.01 million. Here.
I believe that the reason, I asked Zuket earlier, the reason that we are so heavy in cash is we are one firm than the other, and so we weren't able to invest the funds. We're stockpiling and then we'll move forward.
Correct.
That's why, because my first question was, wow, why do we have so much cash not earning?
Yeah, correct.
But that's why, just so both of you know.
Yeah, it's
That's
important
what's going on.
context.
Yes. Okay, this slide shows our asset allocation by quarter. Here you can see our core investments were 47.09%, cash, again, 21%, and then the LAIF and SDCIP at 6.05% and 5.65%. This slide shows our portfolio maturity schedule. 1 to 90 days, 87.3 million. That's mostly cash. 91 to 1 year, 91 days to 1 year, 21.9, and 19 million and 19.5 million to mature over 1.2 and 2.3 years, and we have a little bit in 3.4 years at 4.88 million. This slide shows the 2-year Treasury note compared to the San Diego Housing Commission actual yield. And, so you can see that they meet at the end of June 30th. Do you have any?
So our investment portfolio, we maintain a conservative profile. We look for high quality, short duration core investments and want to make sure that we have sufficient cash and liquidity to meet our anticipated expenditures. Amy talked about some of the guiding documents that basically govern our policy. We have 3 objectives in mind. The first is we always want to focus on the safety of our principal. The second is extending the duration while maintaining sufficient liquidity, and of course generate the highest yield as possible. We also look to invest locally when we have opportunities. We were in the process, as Commissioner Cushman mentioned, of finalizing an agreement with a financial advisory service. Thank you, Commissioner Cushman, for your help with it. We selected PFMAM, Asset Management Services. They're a division of U.S. Bank. They're here with us today, and we're going to call them up to make a presentation, talk a little bit about the market, where we're heading, and give us some of their analysis. They're going to assist us with trade settlements. They're going to do asset allocation reviews. They're going to provide recommendations on portfolio analysis. So with that, I'd like to invite, we have Monique Skype, who's the Managing Director at PFM Asset Management, and Robert Montoya, who's going to be our Institutional Relational Manager.
And hopefully he will successfully move us above the blue line.
Nope, no pressure.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be with the group today. We're excited to start this work with the Housing Commission and have really enjoyed working with your staff as we've spoken about the strategy, the markets, and our presentation today is meant to give you an overview of the market environment that we currently find ourselves in and how it may impact the strategy we're hoping to implement on the Commission's behalf. So we're just waiting for the Nope, no worries.
Sorry about that.
Well, I can start with a couple of brief statements about the market while the presentation is loading. The market right now and where it's going to impact the Commission's portfolio opportunities is really focused on what the Federal Open Market Committee is doing with regard to interest rates. HUD guidelines, the general investment guidelines that governs in California, public agencies generally restrict us to the short end of the yield curve. Essentially, for the most part, we're looking at investments with maturity inside 5 years. The federal funds target rate anchors the yield curve. And so the Fed's stance on lowering interest rates is really where the market is focused. The Fed has a very hard job in front of it, and for the past year, it has been on hold for the most part as it looked to evaluate what the impact of the tariff policy would be and what the growth of the general economy would be in light of some of the constraints. Recently, the Fed has lowered the target rate a quarter of a basis point, and is expected to lower rates perhaps 2 times this year. Big things that they're looking at is the jobs market. We've seen fairly poor jobs numbers, and the impact of the labor market on sentiment has been, this is something that probably needs to be addressed right now, and will worry about what inflation is going to do later. And so some of the, keeping interest rates high was a way to sort of see how inflation was going to go. But as we sit today, the labor market is a little bit more of a pressure on things. And so the Fed, in their latest statements, have focused on labor market concerns. And that's really pushing the idea that we are going to see 2 more rate cuts this year. So more technical difficulties. But you'll be glad to know that I've communicated the majority of the first slide in my public comments, which is just a summary. Which is just a summary of the latest FOMC meeting. So we do expect a rate, again, 2 additional rate cuts this year. And some of the things that, the comments that the Fed has been making have been about, the strain on the economy, waiting to see what goes on with inflation. I'll move forward to the updated economic projections, and this is one of the things that we watch. The Fed has essentially 2 mandates, unemployment and inflation. And so when we're looking at indicators that may give us a sense of what the Fed's doing, these are the indicators that we look at. The way you read these charts is the lighter colors are the previous quarter's projections, and the darker colors are the current quarter's projections. So visually, you can see that the Fed is perhaps a little bit more optimistic about growth in the markets, which is great news for the most part. They're expecting unemployment to essentially be the same at 4.5%. Again, their lowering of interest rates is meant to stabilize some of the employment considerations. And then the yellow is PCE, which stands for Personal Consumption Expenditures Index. It's not something that you hear about often, but it's actually the Fed's gauge of inflation. It's the metric that they like to look at versus CPI, which is the headline number that you hear about the most. PCE, just for context, includes some additional costs for consumers in that number. Interesting today, the cost of medical premiums is included in PCE, and I know medical premiums have been in the news a lot lately. And then lastly, Fed funds target rate, which is what they're projecting the rates will be. And as you can see in 2025, that light orange to darker orange, you can see that they are showing that they are expecting to lower that rate a little bit more this year. This chart is a favorite of ours. We tend to include this in a lot of materials when we present on the markets, because this is a survey essentially of what the FOMC board members are suggesting will be the Fed funds rate at the end of each year. And so I'm going to focus on 2025, which is the column to the left. And at the bottom, we add some notes, and essentially 2 additional rate cuts. What you're seeing with the dots are each member's individual view, and you can see that the median for 2025 show that the vast majority anticipate 2 cuts this year. And so that is what we expect. That is what we are planning on. And most importantly, that is what the yield curve currently shows. So on the next page, we have the U.S. Treasury yield curve across the entire maturity spectrum. Again, for the most part, we will look at investments for the commission out to 5 years. And the 2-year Treasury is a great proxy for where we're investing on average. 3.56% is essentially a good benchmark rate to think at for the portfolio. We'll watch where that goes. And you can see, over the past year, the shaded blue range has shown you what that rate has done. So a lot of difference. At one point, we were closer to 4.3% for the 2-year, and now we're at 3.56. And it's just a matter of reflecting market sentiment, what the Fed is going to be doing. Now, that's a sense of where the rate environment is. So let's talk about what we can do for the portfolio. Yes, question.
I don't mean this to sound like a loaded question, but it might be. With as much coverage as there is in news these days about the influence of the White House on departmental leaders, how confident is the industry in the federal projections? Is there the same confidence today that there was a year ago? I mean, I guess, and how much is the industry depending on those federal projections? Because I've heard some of this come up, and it's certainly there's some concern about influence.
Yeah, that's a great question. And, I think, unfortunately, in the environment we're in, so many of these questions, speak to federal policy, political pressure, et cetera. One thing I will say, Chair Powell has been adamant that the Fed is going to remain unbiased and data dependent in the work that they do. We know the Trump administration is working to remove one of the Fed governors, Lisa Cook. They appointed a new governor to the board. Lisa Cook has been allowed to remain working as a Fed governor while the suit is going. That's very different from some of the other federal officials or appointed folks who have been removed by the Trump administration. So it seems that the Supreme Court is basically confirming that interpretation that the Fed may have special protections from federal influence. And so that, I think, gives the market a little more comfort that the Fed is isolated.
It's really isolated, yeah.
That being said, one of the things that is being talked a lot about in the market is the availability of data that the Fed relies on to make their decisions. With the current government shutdown, there's some concern that some of those data releases may be delayed, and what influence is that going to have as the Fed looks to carry out their policy at the end of the year?
Yeah, no, that's very helpful. And that, by no means, is a political statement on my part, just trying to understand the tools that we use, right, and how they could potentially, how we have to think about them as we move forward. So I appreciate the feedback.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. So talking about the portfolio that we're looking at implementing for the commission, one of the things we're really working to do is, implement a more active strategy. As you saw when we looked at yield, the yield curve, you saw the extreme volatility of rates, which means that, that provides us some opportunities to add value. The first thing we're looking to do for the commission is to further diversify the portfolio. We have a sample portfolio shown here of some of the things we're looking to implement. We'll be working perhaps to put some of that cash to work in some of these additional sectors in the portfolio allowed by your policy guidelines. The duration distribution at the bottom right shows you essentially what we'll be looking to do maturity bucket wise, taking advantage of investments in the 0 to 1 year area, 1 to 2, and 2 to 3. We'll be utilizing the 0 to 3 year Treasury Index as a benchmark, which is essentially a good guideline that we'll use to gauge maturities and also duration risk. Duration being very close to average maturity of the portfolio, but it will also help us measure the impact of interest rate changes on the portfolio assets as well. Right now, given where yields are, we expect a gross yield in the portfolio of 375, which is a little bit higher than where we sit right now. We'll be looking to implement these investments over the current quarter, and we'll be in continuous contact with your staff to ensure that we keep knowledgeable about any cash flow needs for the commission. But we're really excited to get to work and have been working in earnest with your staff over the past few months. That's our last formal slide. I'll hold for any additional questions. Yes, go ahead.
I appreciate Lisa's question. One kind of related question to, whether and how the ground beneath our feet is changing. This is, I guess, a Suket question, although I think we lost him. Oh, yeah, there you go. I know that this is heavily directed by HUD rules for good reason. Many rules that haven't changed in a long time have been changing lately. Has there been any notice from HUD that there's any changes to their policies as with respect to how local agencies handle their investments?
So actually, some of the policies go back to 1996. You're right, they're very old. And that is one of the conversations we had with PFM-AM when we were scoping out different vendors. One of the things we want to do with PFM-AM is to explore what we can, how far we can push on some of these policies. We are going to, with our investments, because our investments are pooled together, we take a look at the state guidelines, we take a look at the federal guidelines, and we normally hold the most stringent one accountable. But there is room, we believe there is room for growth in the federal level, and with a big firm like PFM-AM, Monique, if you want to speak to some of the conversations we had as to there should be possibilities in there.
Yeah, the California government code is a fairly conservative government code. And so, our hope is that we can leverage the government code guidelines with HUD and essentially suggest an exemption to their policy to allow us some more investment options in the portfolio, but still keeping within the general premise of, very safe, high quality investment grade securities.
Yeah, thank you. And I do want to emphasize the last part you said, because I think I'm probably at this moment less eager for us to push. I think that's a great idea. It sounds like we're not doing anything crazy here. I'm more curious. We've seen pretty sweeping changes through all kinds of rules, so I'm more curious, just as an FYI, if there is any change to the federal rules, please let us know, because I could see all kinds of things we haven't thought of happening.
Nothing yet to report, but we will keep that as part of the agenda.
So I think that in spite of this, I think these folks will probably, I'll go on the limb, tell you they'll increase our returns by 50%. I think you're going to be amazed when you see what these folks can do. They do it for a lot bigger funds than ours. They are consummate professionals. We're really fortunate to have them representing us. And the original chart that you saw is going to look a whole lot different a year from today. I think we'll be very, very pleased with these folks. It was fun going through the process. But I think they bring a whole new light to what we're doing and how we're doing it. We'll still be very conservative. We're not going to get carried away. We're not, we can't go out and, buy equities or do anything like that. But just spreading out the yield curve a bit, I think a year from today we're going to be very, very pleased with what we see.
Thank you. Thank you for putting in the time on that and bringing your expertise to it. And I put a lot of weight in what you just said. And I do want to let you know I feel very comfortable at this meeting. I think probably more comfortable than I did at the last one. So any anxiety that I'm expressing is related to our world we're living in, not anyone here helping us through it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Those are excellent comments. Anybody else have any comments regarding, or questions regarding the presentation? All right. So I believe since this is an informational item and there is no vote, then we are done with this situation. But I wanted to say thank you to your organization, and we do look forward to seeing what the results are going to be in a year. You know, you have to find the silver lining in every situation you're at. It's adaptation, and it also is a sign of intelligence. So I'm looking forward to what transpires from all your guys' hard work. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This concludes, since there are no other additional items on the agenda, this concludes the Investment Committee's special meeting today. This meeting is adjourned at 8:37. Thank you so much for your participation.